Okay, we are towards the top of Daf Nun Beis Amud Aleph, 4 lines from the top, where it says Tana de Bei Menashia. Zok the Gemara Tana de Bei Menashia. They learned in the yeshiva of Menashia, Eiz Shechokakla Bein Karneha, a goat that they carved out holes between its horns, and that's where they put in a halter in order for it to be restrained. Yaitze ba'afser b'Shabbos. You're allowed to go out with it, with this afser, with the halter on Shabbos. And the point over here is that because it has a very thin neck, as Rashi here explains, so if you just put a band around its neck, and then you put you have a halter that's tied to that, the goat could wiggle its way out of it, and it won't be properly restrained. So therefore, that's the kind of restraint that is not going to be allowed to walk out with it on Shabbos. But if you carved holes between its horns, and over there you placed in the halter, so then it's properly restrained, and you could walk out with it that way on Shabbos. By Rav Yosef, Tochav Labis Keina Mahu. What if he stuck the halter into the goat's beard? He tied it into its beard. Could you go out with it that way in Shabbos? If the goat would try to get itself loose from this halter, so it's going to hurt her because the beard is going to be pulled out. So she's not going to come to cut herself loose from it, and therefore this is a good halter, and you can walk out with it on Shabbos. Tying it into the beard, sometimes it could become loose and fall off, and the person will come to carry it and therefore it's not allowed to go out with it on Shabbos, which is a new gzeira which we haven't seen till now, meaning even if it is a proper restraint, but there's another gzeira here that it might fall off, and then you'll come to carry a dal damas b'rishus harabim. Teiku, the Gemara does not resolve this question. Tanan Hasam. Now the Gemara returns to the main topic that we were discussing yesterday in the Gemara, and that is when you have an tirusa yeseda, meaning you have a restraint that you're using for the animal that's extra. What's the din? Do you say because it's an unnecessary restraint, it's considered to be a burden, and the animal is carrying on Shabbos, or the fact that it's being used as a restraint and it's not just a burden, so the animal is not carrying on Shabbos? That's the main question we're discussing in the sugya. So the Gemara brings from another Mishnah later on to try to resolve this question. Tanan Nasam, we learned later here in this Perek, that a cow is not allowed to go out with a strap that's between the horns. So what's the reason why it's not allowed to go out? So the Gemara here brings a machlokes that there is regarding the pshat in this Mishnah. Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said that there was an argument, Pligi bar Rav Shmuel, Chadama, Bein Lenoi, Bein Leshamer, Oser. One of them says, and we're going to see soon who says which opinion, but one of them says whether the strap is there for decoration or the strap is there to restrain the cow, either way, it's forbidden to go out with it on Shabbos. Chadama Lenoi Oser. If it's going out for the decoration, then it's going to be aser. L'shamer, but if it's to control the cow, then it's mutter, then it's permitted. So they're arguing about l'shamer. If you put a strap to restrain the cow, is it permitted to go on, that's between the horns, so is it permitted to go out with it that way in Shabbos? So the Gemara first tries to figure out who is it that holds which opinion. So the Gemara Amar Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef said, Tistayim, let us bring a proof. The Shmuel, who the Amar, the Shmuel is the one that said, Lenoi Aser. If it's for a decoration and the cow's horns, then it's forbidden. L'shamer mutter. But if it's to restrain the cow, then it's permitted. Why? What's the raya? Because we had before quoted in the name of Shmuel, halacha kechananya, that the halacha is like Hananya, which says that if you have an extra restraint that's unnecessary, that it's okay, you can still go out with it on Shabbos. So now the Gemara is applying the same thing over here to the cow. And as Rashi explained, when it comes to a cow, it doesn't really need any restraint whatsoever, any halter or anything to keep it and restrain it, because he just walked together with the cow and it is not run away. So if so, over here, having this restraint for the cow is extra. So Shmuel, that says that it's permitted, is following his opinion that he goes according to Hananya, he paskined like Hananya, which said before in the Gemara, the case that Hananya was speaking about, as the Gemara explained it, if you remember, was using extra restraint for a cat that doesn't need that extra restraint, and Hananya said that that's allowed on Shabbos. So the Gemara is applying the same thing over here to the cow, that according to Shmuel, even though it doesn't need any restraint whatsoever, but if you had a restraint that you placed between its horns, you're allowed to go out with it on Shabbos. This would be the raya that this is Shmuel's opinion. So the Gemara here is bringing you from this Mishnah and from this opinion of Shmuel as another proof to this concept. So Abaye says, Adarabba, on the contrary, Tistayim, I'll bring you a raya, the Shmuel the Amar, that Shmuel is the one that says, Bein lenoi, bein l'shamer, whether you're putting the strap between the horns for decoration purposes or to restrain the animal also, that it's forbidden. So this is also what we quoted yesterday in the Gemara. Rav Yehuda said again in the name of Shmuel, that the students are in front of Rebbe, they switch the cases of the Mishnah, shalzu, bezu, and if you use a restraint that's unnecessary, which would be in the case of a camel, if you're using a restraint that's placed as a nose ring, which is a very strong restraint, and it's unnecessary for a camel, that's one of the cases that we're questioning. What would be the halacha? Are you allowed to walk out with that on Shabbos? Omar Lefonov, Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yosi. So Rabbi Shmuel Bar Yosi said in front of Rabbi, Kach Oma Abba. This is what my father Rabbi Yosi said. Dalet behemes yitzis ba'afser. 4 animals can go out only with a halter: a sus, a horse, a pered, a mule, a gomel, a camel, a chamoyer, and a donkey. So what do you see from here? Lav. This statement that Rabbi Yosi said that these 4 animals can go out only with a halter. Lemute gomel b'chatoim. A camel cannot go out with an extra restraint, which is when you have the nose ring. Okay, and this entire story here that happened with Rebbe, with the students asking Rebbe the question, and Rabbi Shmuel Bar Rabbi Yosi that gave the answer in the name of his father, this is all a quote of what Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. Shmuel recorded this and repeated this incident that happened. So over here we see that a gomel that's using an extra restraint, which is a chataim, is not allowed. So if so, going back to before, we have a raya from here that Shmuel holds that by a cow that doesn't need any restraint, if you're using a strap to put between its horns to restrain it, it's not allowed. Tosfos here points out that we had this Gemara yesterday, and there the Gemara concluded that not necessarily is it coming to exclude a gomel b'chataim. The Gemara there said a different shot, that it's coming to exclude a knockoff female goat that's using a weaker restraint. And that's when it's going to be a burden. Okay, but for some reason the Gemara doesn't bring it up over here. Tosfos is not to answer his question. Either way, the point over here is, in Shmuel's opinion, we now have seemingly 2 contradictory ideas here. 2 they contradict each other. One is the fact that Shmuel paskined like Hananya, that in the case of a cat, when you're using an extra restraint, it's okay. And then over here, Shmuel seems to have repeated a halacha that is telling us that when you have an extra restraint in the case of a camel, that it's not okay. So the Gemara says, Sami ha mikami ha. You have to erase this second thing over here that is brought, that Shmuel said. You have to erase this because of what we said before, that Shmuel paskined in the name of Hananya. So if he paskins like Hananya by the cat, that an extra restraint is fine, we have to erase this, that it's mentioned that he heard to say that by a camel it's not okay. Frag the Gemara, why are you saying that? Why are you erasing the second statement that we brought in the name of Shmuel in favor of the first statement that Shmuel paskin like Hananya to be lenient about this? Maybe do the other way around. Sami ha mikami ha. Maybe erase the case that he paskined like Hananya being more lenient, and leave this that he said over here being more stringent, that by a camel you can't use an extra restraint. How do we know about this? So the Gemara says the Ashkechan. There's two gerses. Whether you are guided this line in the Gemara, let's read it together with the parentheses in the Gemara. The Ashkechan, because we find that Shmuel Ludama, we clearly find that Shmuel is the one that says that Lenoi Aser, using a strap by a cow for a decoration is forbidden. Just for the decoration, you're not allowed to take it out on Shabbos. But L'Shamer Mutter, if you're using it as a restraint to control the cow, then it's permitted. Where do we find that Shmuel said this clearly? Rav Chiya bar Ashi said in the name of Rav, Bein Lenoi, whether the strap is there for decoration, Bein L'Shamer, whether it's there to restrain the cow, also, it's forbidden. It's an extra restraint. The cow doesn't need it. Rav Chiya bar Oven says, Shmuel, in the name of Shmuel, so here we have clearly that this is Shmuel's opinion, Lenoi Asur, if it's there just for a decoration, then it's forbidden. L'Shamer, but if it's there to restrain the cow, then in Mutter, then it's permitted. So here we clearly see that this is Shmuel's opinion, an extra restraint to take out an animal on Shabbos is permitted. Meisvei, so the Gemara asks a shaila, and this is a braise that actually discusses the halacha by para aduma. One of the halachas by para aduma is it's not allowed to have done any work or carried any burden, because if it does, it's not fit anymore for para aduma. As the Gemara will bring the pasuk in a moment. So over here as well, we see that we have to look when the para has a restraint. Is it something which is an extra burden, or is it being used as a restraint? So Meisvei, we learned in a braisa regarding a paraduma, koshra ba'alea b'maiseira, the owner of a paraduma tied it to a leash, ksheira. It's still kosher to be used for the paraduma. Now, if you're going to say that because a cow does not need a leash, so therefore it's an extra restraint, and like we said over here regarding Shabbos, that might be considered to be a burden. You're not allowed to carry with this on Shabbos. This is the opinion of Rav, that an extra burden is carrying. If so, over there it should also be considered a burden. The Torah says that a paraduma is only fit to be used as a paraduma if no burden has been placed upon it. So how over there does it say that if the owner tied it with a restraint, with a leash, that it's still allowed to be used as a paraduma? It's an extra restraint, it doesn't need it, and therefore it should be considered a burden. So this is a question on Rav. So the Gemara answers, Amar Abaye. So Abaye, the Gemara gives here three answers. Abaye answers, B'maylicha me'ir li'ir. There it's talking about when the person is taking this para aduma, he's leading it from one city to another. So when it's in the same city, so over there the para aduma does not go away. But when it's going away from its city, it's going from one city to another. So here, as Rashi explains, the para wants to go back to its resting place, and therefore it's going to run back to go to its place where it came from. So over here it does need a restraint. Rava Omar, Rava says, Shani para de domea yekonin. A para aduma is different than a regular cow. In a regular case, an owner is just going to walk beside his para and lead it that way, and he's not afraid that it's going to run away. You come with a para aduma though, which is extremely expensive. Here, it's normal for a person to have a leash in order to make sure that this para aduma doesn't go away. Ravina says a third answer, B'mayredes. Here we're talking about a wild, rebellious cow. In a case of a rebellious cow, over here the restraint, the leash, is not considered to be extra, it's not considered to be a burden, and therefore it's still kosher for the para aduma. The Gemara continues now to quote the next part of the Mishnah. What does it say in the Mishnah? Hasus b'sheir. A sus is allowed to go around with this band, with this collar that's around its neck, that's used for a leash. And then the Mishnah continued and said that kol hanimshachin b'shir, sorry, again the lashon of the Mishnah, v'chol bali asher, all those that have this band around their neck, it's common for them to have this band, as Rashi here brings, for example, when it comes to dogs that a person uses when he goes out hunting, that he goes out with dogs. So, Yaitzim b'shir v'nimshachim b'shir. They can go out with this b'shir, that's the right pronunciation. They can go out with this band, and they can be nimshachim b'shir. And they could also be pulled by this leash, that is. It's a band which then has a leash. They can be pulled with this, go out with this leash, and pulled with this leash. So the Gemara wants to understand what is the double lashon of the Mishnah. It seems to be unnecessary. Ma yoitzin. What is the meaning of the fact that they go out? Umayim shachin. And then what does it mean that they're pulled? If they're going out and they're being pulled, it seems to be a redundancy. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rav Huna. Rav Huna said, Oy yoitzin kruchin. The Mishnah is actually saying two different things. Oy yoitzin kruchin. That these animals may go out either with this leash wrapped around their necks. In other words, the leash is not actually being used as a leash. There's a band and there's a leash, but it's all just wrapped around their neck. It's not being used as a leash. That's what yoitzin means. Or you can use it that they should be pulled by the leash. Okay, so there's a separate chiddush over here regarding yoitzin, that even if they're not being pulled by this leash, it's just wrapped around their neck. It could also be used this way. Okay, so that's the pshat that Rav Huna said in the Mishnah. Shmuel says no. If it's kruchen, if it's just a leash that's wrapped around its neck, it can't go out that way. What's the pshat in the Mishnah? How do you read yoitzin and nimshachin? Yoitzin nimshachin. It could only go out if you're pulling it by the leash. That's why the Mishnah says yoitzin and nimshachin, not as two separate statements. On the contrary, the Mishnah is trying to say it could go out if you're pulling it by the leash. Ve'ein yoitzin kruchen, but it cannot go out if it's only being wrapped around the neck and you're not pulling it by the leash. Sagt the Gemara, in a Braise, when we learned this case that the Mishnah says, so in a Braise we learned that it says, Yoitzin Kruchen, it can go out, the animal can go out together with this leash while it's wrapped around the neck, but the Yoitzin Nimshachim, that is, sorry. The Braise says, again, sorry, let me look again over here, the Lashon of the Braise. Masnita Tone, Yoitzin Kruchen Li Moshech. You can go out with the band and the leash wrapped around its neck, but li moshech, there has to be a space for the person to stick his hand in to be able to pull the animal. So even if he's not actually using the leash because it's wrapped around the neck, but still there has to be a space there that the person should be able to stick his hands in by its neck to be able to pull the animal. That's the way Rashi explains the Gemara. So l'chayr over here we see, like what Shmuel said, that even if it's wrapped around the neck, you won't be able to take it out on Shabbos unless you could stick your fingers in to be able to pull it by this band. If not, it's just wrapped around its neck. You can't take it out that way on Shabbos. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Amar Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef said, Chazina lohule igli de bei Rav Huna. I saw the calves by Rav Huna, Yitzin, ba'avsereyen, kruchim b'Shabbos. They went out with their leashes that were tied or that were wrapped around their neck, so they weren't being pulled by it, and still it's allowed to go out on Shabbos. Now, ki asa Rav Dimi Amar Rab Chanina, when Rav Dimi came, so he reported in the name of Rab Chanina that mulayis shel beis Rebbe, the mules in the house of Rebbe, yoitzeis ba'avsereyen b'Shabbos, they would go out with their halters on Shabbos. And he didn't report exactly how they would go out with their halters on Shabbos. So the Gemara now questions: were these halters wrapped around their neck, and that's how they went out, or they were being led, they were being pulled by them, by the halters? So the Gemara wants to know, how does Rebbe hold? Does he hold like Rav Huna, that kruchen is allowed, or does he hold like Shmuel, that you have to be pulling them by the halter in order for it to be allowed? Tashama, so the Gemara brings a raya to this, because ki asa Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda Amar Rab Chanina. Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda, he said in the name of Rav Chanina that mulai shel beis Rebbe yaitzeis ba'avsereyen kruchen b'Shabbos, that the mules by Rebbe's house would go out with the halters and they wore wrapped around their neck. So he reported like Rab Chanina regarding the mules in the house of Rebbe, but he reported specifically that they were kruchem b'Shabbos, that they wore wrapped around their neck and they would still be able to go out this way on Shabbos. Amrua Rabbanan Kamei de Ravasi. So the Rabbanan repeated and they reported this statement that Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda said in front of Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. So they reported this to him. And so again, Amrua Rabbanan Kamei de Ravasi, the Rabbanan reported this that Rav Yehuda bar Shmuel said in the name of Rav Asi, that in the house of Rebbe they went out with the mules with this halter that was tied around, that was wrapped around the neck, and they said, "Ha, the Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda lo yitzricha." We don't need this clarification. This clarification of Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda that the mules in the house of Rebbe went out with the halters wrapped around their neck is not necessary. Mid Rav Dimi nafka. Even from Rav Dimi that said that the mules of the house of Rebbe went out with the halters, and he did not clarify whether it was wrapped around the neck or they were pulling them by these halters, I would understand on my own what it means. I don't need the clarification of Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. Why not? So the Gemara explains. If you think that when Rav Dimi reported from the house of Rebbe, that the mules would go out only if they're being pulled by their halter and not if it's being wrapped around the neck, if so, mid Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel nafke, that's allowed. I don't need Rav Dimi to report this to me from what happened in the house of Rebbe. I would know this from another statement that Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel. Rav Yehuda, Shmuel, as we mentioned before, Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, Machlif and Hoyel Lefnei Rebbe shal zu bezu mahu. The question was asked to Rebbe. If you switch around what it says in the Mishnah and you give a camel an extra restraint, you give a camel a nose ring as a restraint, and this is an extra restraint, is that allowed? Amal of Rabbi Shmuel bar Yosi. So Rabbi Shmuel bar Yosi said, there's only 4 animals can go out only with a halter. Hasus va'pered va'gomel va'chamoyer, the horse and the mule and the camel and the donkey can go out with an afser. So what do we see over here? That these 4 can go out with an afser and they cannot go out with an extra restraint. So therefore, you cannot have something which is extra on Shabbos. So we already know from Rav Yehuda amar Shmuel that they could only go out if they're being pulled by the halter and not with an extra restraint. So therefore, when Rav Dimi reported how things happened in the house of Rebbe, it would be understood that it only means if they're being pulled by the halter. It's not necessary to have any clarification for that. That's the Gemara's question now. So the Gemara says, no, not necessarily. Amalahu Ravasi. So Ravasi says, Itzterich lahu. We still need the report. Itzterich lahu. We still need to clarify what happened in the house of Rebbe. Why? If we just have this statement of Rav Yehuda, Nafke Havamina Amalafana v'le Kibla Mine. Possibly, the conversation that happened between Rebbe and Rab Shmuel bar Yosi reported that his father said that that the behemoths can go out with an afser only if you're pulling it by the afser, but that not necessarily did he accept it. Not necessarily did Rebbe accept what he said. He reported that that's what his father said, but we don't know that Rebbe accepted that. Kamash Malon de Rav Dimi. So therefore we bring what Rav Dimi said, that he did accept it. V'i de Rav Dimi, because Rav Dimi says that in the house of Rebbe they used an afser. V'i de Rav Dimi. Now that we have the report of Rav Dimi, hava mina hana milinim shachen. Maybe only if you're actually pulling the animal with this halter. Aval kruchen loy. Maybe if the halter is just wrapped around its neck, you're not allowed to take it out on Shabbos. Kamash malon de Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda. So therefore we have the final statement of Rav Shmuel bar Yehuda that reported specifically that in the house of Rebbe they used a halter, and for the mule that is, and even when they didn't pull it by the halter, it was still allowed on Shabbos. So now we go to the next part of the Mishnah. Here the Mishnah was discussing the halacha of Tumah and Para Aduma B'Negeya to these bands that are around the neck of the animal. So the Mishnah said, Mazan alein v'toivlon b'mekayman. You can sprinkle the waters of the Para Aduma on this band even while it's still on the body of the animal. You don't have to remove it, and you could also be toivel it even while it's still on the body. The animal goes into the water and it gets immersed in water. The band, it's fine. You don't have to remove it from the animal. Shall we say the b'nei kibule tumeninu, that these bands around the animal could be makabel tumah, are susceptible to tumah? Thought nan, we clearly learned in a Mishnah that says in Kalim tabas adam tmeya, a ring that a person wears on his finger for beauty as a piece of jewelry, that is susceptible to tumah. Tabas behema v'kalim, but a band that an animal wears around its neck, or a tabas that's used as a hook, a ring that's used as a hook to hang kalim, b'shar kol hatabois, or all other kinds of rings that are not used for a person to wear as a jewelry on a finger. So Rashi over here, for example, says that you have rings that are made for a door, rather for a decorative purpose or whatever else it is. They are all tahiris. They are all pure. So we see over here that a band that's used for an animal is not susceptible to tumah. It's not a tachshit, and it's not a keli, and therefore it does not become tameh. So the Gemara answers, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, so Rabbi Yitzchak explains, Bibayin minoi adam l'noi behema. What we're talking about over here is, these are the bands that are being used for an animal, but it was transferred. It was l'chatchila used as a band that a person would adorn himself with it, and then now the person decided that it should be used for his animal. So therefore, once it was used for a person, it is susceptible for tumah. That's Rabbi Yitzchak's answer. Rav Yosef Amar, Rav Yosef answers, since even though it's a band for an animal, but the person is using this band to stick a rope into it to then use it as a leash to pull the animal. So therefore the person, a human being, has a use for this, so this is considered to be a band that's used by a human, and therefore it's susceptible to tumah. Mi loitanya, didn't we learn in a braise, makol shel behema, when you have a stick that's used for animals, right? The person is using a stick. This is a stick, a metal stick that's used for animals to discipline them. Shel matches, right? If it's made out of metal, mekabel tumah, then it is mekabel tumah. If it's made out of wood, if it's just a wood, so the halacha is, there's a difference between a wooden stick and a metal stick. A wooden stick is what's considered to be pshute kli eitz. It's just a simple piece of wood that has not been made into a keli, it doesn't have any receptacle, so therefore it's not mekabel tumah. That's the halacha by wood. But by metal, that it doesn't have to have a receptacle, even if it's just being used for a purpose. Over here, the person is using this metal stick to discipline his animals, mekabel tumah. It's mekabel tumah. Matam, what's the reason? Since a person uses these sticks to drive his animals, to discipline his animals. So hachanami hoyel v'adam moishech behen, because this band, the person sticks the leash into this band, and a person then leads his animal with them, so therefore it's considered to be susceptible to be mekabel tumah because it's used by a human being. The next thing it said in the Mishnah, v'toivlon b'mekayman. You're allowed to be toivel these bands even when they are in their position on the body of the animal. The question of the Gemara is, v'ha'ike chatzitza. But there's a chatzitza here. These bands are tied pretty tightly around the neck of the animal, and then what else is done? In this band, there's a hole, and they place a ring inside of it, and then in that ring, they place the leash. So where they put the ring inside this band, it creates a chatzitza. So the water doesn't enter all the way in all areas of this band. So how could you be toivel it this way? Rav Ami says, Rav Ami b'sherischan. The case over here is that the person took this band and he hammered it out, and he opened up that it should be looser. The hole where they put in the ring is looser, and therefore it's not. There's no chatzitza here, and it could be toiveled even while it's on the body of the animal. So, the Gemara, shall we say that Rav Ami, now going back to what we said before, the Gemara said two interpretations what we're talking about. Either we're talking about, over here regarding this band, either we're talking about a band that was used by a human being and then he decided to use it for his animal. That was Rabbi Yitzchak's answer. Rav Yosef's answer is that no, this is a band that's being used for an animal, and the person is just pulling it. Because the person is pulling it, it's considered to be something that's used by a human, and therefore it's makabel tumah. So now, shall we say, now that we're saying that this band has been, he hammered it out, so then it seems like we'll have to say that Rav Ami follows only Rav Yosef's answer. Why? Because if we're following Rabbi Yitzchak's answer, the Rabbi Yitzchak said, what kind of band are we talking about? A band that was first used as an adornment for a person, and now he's using it for the animal. But kiven de rischon, but once, if he's using it for the animal, and he took it and he hammered it in order to be able to use it for the animal, ovid behu maisa, so he's doing an action to change it, to change it from the way it was before, when it was used by the person as an adornment, and now he hammered it out to be used for the animal. And once you do an action, so the tumah that is on top of it departs from it. All right, so this, and the Gemara brings the source for this concept. If you have tumah in something, and then you go and you change its use, you change it from being used for a human being where it's susceptible to tumah, and now you hammer it, you do an action to hammer it, and now it's being used for an animal, whatever tumah it has departs from it. Where do we see this? The Tanan, we learned in a Mishnah, Kol HaKelim Yordan L'dei Tumasam B'machshava. All kinds of kelim become susceptible for tumah, even just with a person mentally designating it as a keli. For example, if you have raw materials of a hide of an animal, or of leather strips, and you mentally designate it to be used for something, to be used on a chair, or to be used for any purpose, to be used for shoes, once you designated it in your mind, it becomes susceptible to tumah. But how do you remove the tumah of it? Once it's tumah, you can't remove the tumah of it. If this item, which was used as a keli, you do an action to actually break it or change it, and then if you do a maisa, you could remove the tumah from it. So over here, the person took this band that was used as an adornment for a human being, and he hammered it, and now it's being used for an animal, so he did a maisa. If he did a maisa, the tumah should be removed from it. So now that we're saying that he hammered it, it can't be following Rabbi Yitzchak's opinion that this is something that was before used for a human being. It has to be following Rabbi Yosef's interpretation of a Mishnah. No, that it was always used for the animal. He did no maisa, and the reason why it's susceptible to tumah is because a human being uses it to pull the animal. Answers the Gemara, not necessarily. Savalak Rabbi Yehuda, we can say that it's following the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda, the Oma that said, Maise lesakin lav maisehu. When you're doing a maise, in order to be mesakin, you're not doing a maise in order to break it, which then it removes the tumah. So if you do a maise to destruct, and to break the keli, so then that takes away the tumah that the keli had. But if you're doing a maisa, which is a constructive act to make it fit for the use of the animal, so then that's not a maisa that removes the tumah. And the Gemara brings the source for this. The Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda said in a Braisa, Rabbi Yehuda oime le'oma shini maisa lesakin. When we say that a shini maisa, something that has tumah, and you do an action to remove the tumah, that wasn't said lesakin. If you're doing a constructive action, that does not remove the tumah. Ela lekalkel. Only when you do an action in order to ruin it, to destroy it, that's considered to be an action that will remove the tumah. Okay, now the Gemara explains another way how to learn our Mishnah with the issue that we had over here. How could you be toivel this band that's still on the body, on the neck of the animal, if there seems to be a chatzitza, the water is not entering properly? Masnita tone, in a Braisa we learned, what we're talking about over here is be'mechulolin, that this is a collar that has wide holes. The place where you put in the ring is a wide hole, and the water could enter there without a problem. You don't have to hammer it out. Sagt die Gemara weiter. Shoal Talmud Echad mi Galil ha'Elyain es Rabbi Elazar. There's a student from Galil ha'Elyain that asked the following question from Rabbi Eliezer. Shamaiti, I heard a halacha that was taught. Shecholkin ben tabas le tabas. That we make a distinction. There's a certain halachas that we make a distinction between one type of ring and another type of ring. And he wasn't sure regarding what this was relevant. When do you make a distinction between one kind of ring and another kind of ring? Amaloi, so Rabbi Eliezer answered him, Shemaloi Shamaita Elul Inyan Shabbos. Perhaps you heard this shmua, this halacha, to make a distinction between one ring and another only regarding Shabbos. And this is something that's going to come up in the next Pedic, where it discusses regarding a person carrying on Shabbos, walking out on Shabbos with a ring. And the Mishnah there will discuss that there's a ring that has a seal on it, and there's a ring that does not have a seal on it, and there's a difference if you're allowed to carry it on Shabbos. So regarding Shabbos, there could be a chiluk between one ring and another ring. The ilin in tumah, because if we are discussing a ring regarding the subject of tumah, whether it's susceptible to tumah, da v'da chadehi. Whether it has a seal in it, whether it doesn't make a difference. It's all the same thing, and therefore there's no room to make any distinctions. So the Gemara now, this is the answer that Rabbi Eliezer gave this Talmud, this student from Galil Elyon. So the Gemara questions this. Are all rings regarding Tumah the same? They're all susceptible to Tumah? The Gemara brings what we just learned before. But we learned in the Braise, Tabas, Adam, a ring that's for a human being that you wear on a finger for beauty, Tameya. So that's Tumah. Tabas behema v'kelim, but a ring that's used as a band for the animal or used to hang kelim, so it's v'shar kol tabois, or other kinds of rings that are not for a human being, tahiros. So they're all tired. So we see over here that even regarding tumah, there could be a distinction between one ring and another ring. So why is he telling you that there's no distinction? Answers the Gemara, Kika Amalei, the question that was being asked, Iunami the Adam. He was telling him, they were discussing the rings of a human being, and he was telling him, if it's a ring that's worn by a person on a finger, over there's no chiluk between one ring and another, like there is regarding Shabbos. Adam ka Amalei, that's what he's talking about. Frek the Gemara, Vida Adam, Da Vida Achasi, and regarding a ring that a person wears, it's also always going to be Tameh. Tanya, but we learned in Abraise, Tabas, Masnov. So even regarding a human being, there are different kinds of rings. There are rings that are worn on a finger, and then there's other kinds of rings. If you have a ring or sort of a band that's being used for a person to gird his loins, or lakasha ba masnov, or to tie his sleeves between his shoulders to keep his sleeves up. So what's the halacha? These kinds of rings are tahir. They're not susceptible to be mekabel tumah. Tahira, that is. V'lei amru tmeya, and the not tameh, a ring that a person wears is not tameh, ela shel etzba bulvad. Only the rings that a person wears on his finger. So what do we see over here? That even regarding a ring that a person wears is also not necessarily Mikabel Tumah. It depends what the purpose of the ring is. Is he wearing it on his finger, or is he just wearing it for his clothing, to support his clothing? So the Gemara answers, Ki Kamalei Yonami, the Etzpa Kamalei. He was telling him that there's no distinction between one ring and another. They were talking about the ring that a human being wears on his finger. Frag the Gemara, the etzba, dovada, achasi, any ring that a person wears on his finger will always be tameh, but vatnan, we learned in the Mishnah, Masechta Kelim, the Mishnah says, tabas shel matches. What's if the ring, the material of the ring is metal? The chaisma, and the seal of the ring, shel almaig, is made up of almaig, which is some kind of a wood. Tmeya, then it's tameh, because since most of the ring is made up of metal, as I mentioned before, there's a difference between metal and wood. When it comes to metal, even if it doesn't have a form of a receptacle, it's still makabel tumah. Wood, if it doesn't have it's not a keli that has a receptacle, it's not makabel tumah. So over here, this ring is not a receptacle, but if most of it is made up of metal and only the chaisim, the seal, is made up of wood, so then it's tameh. Shal almoik, if the ring itself is a wooden ring, the chaisma shal matches, and only the seal is of metal, since most of it is from the wood, of the almoig wood, tahira. So then the ring is tahir. So here again we see that even when it comes to a ring that a human being wears on a finger, there's still a distinction regarding tumah. So why did Rabbi Eliezer tell the student that when it comes to a ring by a human being on the finger, there's no chiluk between one kind of ring or another? Answers the Gemara, Ki ka'amalei nami iu kula shel matches ka'amalei. The conversation there and what he was telling him, that regarding tumah there's no difference. They were talking about a usual simple ring that's made out of a metal material, whether gold, silver, or so on. Regarding that, he was telling you that there's no distinction regarding Tumah, but regarding Shabbos, there is a distinction if it has a seal, if it doesn't have a seal, whether you're allowed to carry it out on Shabbos, as we'll see in Yetz Hashem in the next Pedic. Another question this student from Galil Elyon asked Rabbi Eliezer, Shamaiti, I heard, that there's a certain halacha where we make a distinction between one needle and another needle. And he wasn't sure regarding what he heard this. So again, Amalei, Rabbi Eliezer said to him, perhaps you heard about this distinction between one needle and another, again only regarding carrying out a needle on Shabbos. Shabbos. The ilin in tumah, but if it's regarding the halacha of tumah, whether it's susceptible for tumah, da v'da achasi, both needles, any needle has the same halacha, it's susceptible to tumah. Fragt the Gemara, is this the case? Ule'inyin tumah da v'da achasi, and regarding a needle, is it always susceptible for tumah? But we learned in the Mishnah again, the Mishnah in Kalim, Macha Chanital Chuda, a ring that its eye was taken out. Or chura, actually, sorry, a ring that the hole, the eye of the needle was taken out, or ukza, or the point of the needle was taken off, tahira. So it's tahir. It can't be used for its function, so it's not a keli anymore. It's just it's unusable, so therefore it's not susceptible for tumah. So what do we see here? There's different types of needles regarding tumah. If the eye is still there, the point is still there, and it could be used, so then it's susceptible to tumah. Otherwise, it's not. So how could he tell him that regarding a ring, regarding a needle, there's no difference when it comes to susceptibility of tumah? Answers the Gemara, Ki ka'amale b'shleima. They were talking about, and what he was telling him regarding tumah, there's no difference, is when the ring is whole, when it's full, it's complete. It wasn't cut off from either side, not the point of it, not the eye of the needle. There's no distinction regarding tumah, but there is a distinction regarding Shabbos, as we'll see later also in the next perek. The Gemara will discuss certain needles are used as for decorative purposes. It's like a piece of jewelry, so you're allowed to walk out with it on Shabbos. But if it's a needle that's used for sewing or whatever, so that's not allowed to be you're not allowed to walk out with that on Shabbos. Frag the Gemara, ubishleima da v'da achasi. If you have a complete needle, is it always going to be susceptible for tumah? But vatnan, we learned over there further in the Mishnah in Kalim, machat shehel sachaluda, a ring that became, a needle that became rusty, imak v'satfiram. If it became rusty to the point that it does not allow you to do your job of sewing with it, then tahira, then it's tahir, it's not susceptible to tumah, it can't be used anymore. V'im lav, but if not, if it still could be used for sewing, then it's tameh. V'amri debei Rab Yanai, and they said in the yeshiva of Yanai, v'hu sherishuma niker, that this halacha only applies when the impression is discernible. In other words, if the original shape of the needle is still discernible, so then the needle is still going to be tameh. So over here you see clearly that there's a difference between one kind of needle and another kind of needle, even when it has the eye and it has the point, but there's a difference if it's rusty or if it's not rusty. And for the Gemara, ki ka'amar lei, the conversation that they were having, what did Rabbi Eliezer tell his student? B'shifa ka'amar lei. He was talking about a polished needle that was not rusty. And there's no distinction between one needle and another, like there is b'negei to Shabbos. Ubeshifa, and regarding a polished needle that's not rusty, da v'da achasi, the halacha of needles are always the same and it's always susceptible to be mekabel tumah. But for Tanya, we learned in a Braisa, machat, a needle, bein nekuva, bein ein nekuva, whether it has an eye, whether it has it's pierced and it has an eye in the needle, or whether not, mutter letaltla b'Shabbos. You're allowed to move it around on Shabbos. V'lo yamirina nekuva ela le'inyin tumah bulvad. And the halacha that it has to be nekuva in order to be makabel tumah was only said regarding tumah. So right over here we see regarding a needle that there's a distinction between whether it was already pierced or it was not already pierced. When it comes to Shabbos, we say mutal taltala, and it doesn't make a difference. When it comes to tumah, over here, dafke by tumah, he says that there's a difference whether it was already pierced to have the eye in it or not. And answers the Gemara, Hatirgema Abaya Libe de Rave. Abaya explained that statement over there according to Rave. What is it talking about? It's talking about begolmi. It's talking about unfinished needles that were not pierced yet. Also over there we say that it's not susceptible to tumah. And that's not the conversation that Rabbi Eliezer had. Rabbi Eliezer was speaking to his student about finished needles, and over there he told him that legabi tumah, when you have a finished needle that's not rusty and that it has its point and it has the eye in it, there's no chiluk between one and another, it's always makabel tumah. Whereas legabi Shabbos, as we'll see in the next perek, even when you have a finished needle, still there's going to be a distinction which needles you're allowed to carry out on Shabbos and which you are not allowed to carry out on Shabbos. That's the end of the sugya for today. We will continue Mitzvah tomorrow. Everyone should have a great day. Hatzlacha Rabbah and everything you do.